Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, members of this subcommittee, for having given me the honor and the opportunity to be here to share with you my experience of 3 years and a half being in charge of Ashraf file at the United Nations mission for assistance to Iraq. First, Mr. Chairman, I would like to put on record the fact that during these 3 years and a half, I worked very closely with the young men and women, the American soldiers and officers who were in Camp Ashraf. And I would like to bring to your attention that there will be no opportunity where I wouldn't commend their highly professional and humanitarian attitudes. They have been, from 2003 till 2009, we don't have, at Yunami, at the mission, United Nations mission in Iraq, we don't have any record of any complaint against their behavior in Camp Ashraf. I worked closely with them. I received all the support. And at very short notice, they've been always there to accompany me, to protect me, and to help me. They made available helicopters to me at very short notice. And I'm here to testify and rather commend that kind of highly humanitarian conduct they have shown during those years I worked with them. Mr. Chairman, I would like first to put the whole situation of Camp Ashraf in its context, its legal context. First, I have to say that from the time the camp was handed over to the Iraqi authorities, and let me be clear, because when we say Iraqi authorities, we are generalizing, because in fact this file is run by the office of the Prime Minister. So the file was handed over in 2009, and from the first day the Prime Minister's office took over this file, we started receiving complaints. We started receiving complaints about serious violations of human rights, serious violation of humanitarian standards. And when we asked, why aren't you keeping the standard set by the American forces? And they will say to me straight away that these people do not deserve any human rights or any humanitarian treatment. They are terrorists. My mission, Mr. Chairman, was to monitor human rights and the humanitarian situation of Camp Ashraf. And for me, everybody in the camp is presumed innocent till they are duly condemned by a court of law. Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, the United Nations have dealt with this file in reversing the fundamental principle of presumption of innocence. We have dealt, and I say we, including myself, because I was the lead person on this file. We have dealt with bad faith, and we have presumed guilt, and we expect these people to prove their innocence. This is fundamentally against the main and the fundamental values of the United Nations. Mr. Chairman, in 2008, 17 July 2008, the Council of Ministers met and decided to close down Camp Ashraf. This decision is the official policy of the government of Iraq. So I'm not going to add to it or diminish it. This is the Council of Ministers set officially the policy. This policy, first put as a policy, is to close down the camp. Second is to revive warrants, arrest warrants against a number of residents of Camp Ashraf. Third, to make it a criminal offense for anybody or organization, any individual or organization to deal with residents of Camp Ashraf. Fourth, any organization or individual are banned from visiting Camp Ashraf. And that explains everything when we report, we, the United Nations, reported that everybody is welcome and that the United Nations, rather the government of Iraq, is meeting its international obligations. At the time, the Iraqi government itself decided and reiterated every year, including in July 2011, reiterated this policy of treating them as terrorists. Anybody who deals with them is committing a criminal offense. Nobody is allowed to visit them. And then all the treatment that followed. I don't have time to go into details. Probably I will answer your question on any details you would like me to bring to your attention. But having set this policy, and the United Nations periodically sends reports to say that the Iraqi government is meeting its international human rights obligations. I will not make any comment. I will leave it to you to draw the conclusions how things are conducted. If the Iraqis themselves are saying we are not respecting the human rights of these people, then the UN reports that they are respecting. That speaks for itself. So, Chairman, when we started talking about relocating Camp Ashraf to Camp Liberty, it was the chair of the so-called Ashraf Committee who met with Yunami and the representatives of the High Commission of Refugees. And he did warn us very clearly. He said, United Nations, do whatever you want, but we will not implement the human rights and the humanitarian standards the United Nations is advocating for. So that is part of the Iraqi policy. It's not hidden, it's on record. But again, we at the United Nations, we reported that the Iraqi government meets its international obligations. I would like to move to the conduct of Yunami, how we dealt with this situation. Since I was appointed in charge of this file in January 2009, I worked for 3 special representatives of the Secretary General of the United Nations. Initially, we were working as mandated by the Security Council Resolution 1770, which gives the Yunami the authority to monitor and report. So the 2 SRSGs, 2 special representatives of the Secretary Generals I worked with, worked on this monitoring and reporting. Then came the 3rd special representative of the Secretary General last October From the very first day, he turned Yunami. This is internally, we used to say, Yunami has been turned into Yunama. The Yunama is United Nations mission for closing Camp Ashraf. So this sudden change of policy, have made Yunami devote its assets and time and personnel. 95% of Yunami was put towards helping the government of Iraq to close Camp Ashraf. Serious money spent on this operation. Serious taxpayers' money spent on this operation to assist the Prime Minister's office implementing the policy I've just stated, which fundamentally against the principles of the United Nations. So in a way, we have used taxpayers' money to defeat the fundamental values of the United Nations. I reminded my boss, the Special Representative of the Secretary General, constantly that what we are doing is unacceptable. I always receive the reply, be positive. Be positive, it means close your eyes. Work with us. And I try to be positive in doing my work as dictated by my conscience. But let me explain why is Yunami all of a sudden turned into such a machinery for violating its own values and principles. If we look at the resolution, Security Council Resolution 1770, it determines the mandate of Yunami, which makes it an instrument in the hand of the government of Iraq to do whatever it sees suitable. Now, anything done by Yunami, it has to be on request, and this is the language of the Security Council resolution. It has to be on request from the government of Iraq. I have to admit that while I was the chief of a Human Rights Office, I tried to remove, because every year when we renew the mandates of the Yunami, we draft the first draft of the resolution in order for the Security Council to renew the mandate. I tried to remove this clause of on request from the government of Iraq, but I failed. Now, when we see that the government of Iraq will not tolerate anything that goes against the fundamental policy it set in its resolution of the Council of Ministers, and also there was an incident that it's important to reflect on it. This incident was the elections. The elections where the Al-Iraqiyya won 91 seats, Al-Maliki's State of Law coalition won 89. The government of Maliki requested that they have to recount the ballot. The SRG, who overseen the operation of the elections, stood for Yunami, stood for the principles. He declared that the elections were fair and just, and that there is no need for recounting. Al-Maliki never tolerated this to the then representative of the Secretary General. He requested that his mandate will not be renewed, and this is how we ended up with a new Special Representative of Secretary General, who came and straight away learned the lesson that in order to achieve anything in Iraq, you have to accept whatever the Prime Minister al-Maliki dictates. And from the very first day, this is the policy. Yunami became just an instrument for closing down Camp Ashraf. And not only that, I will not have the time to dwell on other issues that have been completely abandoned, which is fully in mandate of the Yunami. But somehow we just became an instrument to implement the Prime Minister's office policy vis-à-vis Camp Ashraf.
Perhaps you could summarize and
very
rest
quickly
into the record.
Very quickly, Mr. Chairman, I would like just to briefly tell you how we prepared this relocation, how we prepared this MOU. I was the first person who drafted the first draft of the MOU. And I could assure you, Mr. Chairman, that the signed document was not the draft we agreed on with the Iraqis. The signed MOU was simply a document that was agreed incommunicado, in camera, between the SRG, Special Representative of Secretary General, and the Prime Minister himself. So there was a fundamental change in the content and the procedure of the MOU. Camp Liberty. I was the first person to go and visit Camp Liberty. And I reported that Camp Liberty amounts, it is a detention center. Just for Yunami to reach there, we crossed 7 checkpoints. It's a highly fortified military zone with all the headquarters of the military branches of the Iraqi army based in the area. And then all the T-walls, these concrete walls of 3-4 meters surrounding the cameras. And I always address my interlocutors, the Iraqi interlocutors, and I tell them, why do you need all this? These people are asking you, we are living. We would like to leave Iraq. They are not asking to stay. They no longer, they gave up the status in Iraq. They want to live. Why are you dealing with them this way? They tell me, these people are terrorists. You are defending terrorists. So thanks God, at the time I was enjoying certain immunity of the United Nations. Otherwise, I would be subject of their regulations. Now, my visits to Camp Liberty, I always said that this is extremely unacceptable, particularly when we know. We talk about relocation. It's not relocation. It's an eviction. It's a forcible eviction. There is a difference between an eviction and relocation. Relocation is consensual. It's in accord, in agreement with that. But an eviction, it's a forcible eviction, and the United Nations has standards and rules of conduct on how to implement a forcible eviction. The basic element is that people who are evicted should be compensated with similar standard or better. In any circumstances, not less. At Camp Liberty, I was the first one to visit it. I reported that it's absolutely unacceptable. It's a prison-like. But just not to waste your time, Mr. Chairman, I just want to read to you one paragraph of the working group of the United Nations, the Council of Human Rights in Geneva, who deals with this issue. And their conclusion, I read, The working group considers that there is no legal justification for holding the above-mentioned persons, and meaning Ashrafis, and other individuals in camp liberty, and that such detention is not in conformity with the standards and principles of international human rights law, and more specifically, violates Article 9 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Article 9 of 10 of the Convention on Civil and Political Rights. The situation, it adds, the situation of the residents of Camp Liberty is tantamount to that of detainees or prisoners. So this is a document that it will be on your record, but this is the United Nations group. They are specialists, independent specialists, appointed by the Council of Human Rights. This is their conclusion. And I was on the 30th of August, before this working group, testifying that their finding is absolutely correct and absolutely in line with my experience in Yunami, having visited and having worked in Ashraf and Camp Liberty for 3.5 years. I thank you, Mr. President and Mr. Chairman, and I'm prepared to answer any further question you would like to put to me.
Thank you very much. We will have to be brief because we have a hearing afterwards. You said that under United Nations Special Representative, the United Nations basically lost its independence, as Mr. Cobbler lost its independence in Iraq. Could you explain how the United Nations is able to maintain an independence in face of a regime which is obviously now making more and more demands from the Maliki government? And do you consider now the United Nations not to be operating independently of that government, or are they now, which we would say, are the stooges of the government?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do confirm here in front of you that Yunami has no independence whatsoever, that every issue dealt with regarding Ashraf is decided at the Prime Minister's office, and sometimes at the Iranian embassy in Baghdad.
The Iranian embassy in Baghdad, I think that's an important point for us to underscore. Yes. Let me ask you this. While you were operating there in Iraq, was there, to your knowledge, any real effort to perhaps to make sure that people of Camp Ashraf could go to Jordan or Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, or even the United States? Was there was this option pursued by the United Nations or by the United States or by Iraq itself?
Mr. Chairman, it was within my authority to suggest concept papers on possible exits for these people. And I did suggest, after having discussed in length with my counterparts at the U.S. Embassy, I discussed all kinds of exits, but these were always dismissed by my boss because the aim of the relocation is not to just sort of let people disappear in the air. There is a process put in place which is rather cynical, dangerous. And I would like you to draw your own conclusions.
Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What do you think is the motive of the United Nations to lie?
It's very difficult for me to sort of read into the intentions of individuals, but as a matter of policy, New York wants to hear that everything is fine and everything is smooth. And the Secretary General, when he came to Baghdad during the Arab League summit in Baghdad, he expressed satisfaction of how the things are conducted, and he said that he is very proud that the special representative is holding very friendly relations with the Prime Minister. So here there are issues of policy and also personal ambitions, personal attitudes. And I have to testify that from the very first day J. Kabul arrived to Baghdad, he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, "Hi, Mr. Ashraf," meaning I'm going to deal with you very soon. And in fact, he dealt with me in a sense that he reached the point where he removed me from every mailing list of Yunami. As a chief of, as in charge of the file, the leader of the team on Ashraf, I had no access to any information, any report, any document that is circulated related to Ashraf. Not only that, I was banned from visiting Camp Ashraf and Camp Liberty. And it was at that stage I decided to resign because I don't deserve my salary anymore. I was just being kept in an office, very well paid, but I did not deserve it, so I decided to go.
Well, last question. You mentioned, and I just want you to explain a little more behind the scenes of all of this mischief going on with Iraq, Prime Minister, the treatment of the people, and Camp Liberty and Camp Ashraf. You got Iran. What do you think Iran's influence is on Maliki to treat the people in Camp Ashraf so poorly?
I have to say that I will only talk about meetings that I personally attended. And I attended about 5 meetings at the Iranian embassy in Baghdad. The Iranian embassy, when they receive us, they don't want to talk. They want results. And in a very sort of powerful manner, the minute we sit, "What have you done? Tell us, what are the results?" And we were always in a position to sort of, in a defensive position, apologetic position, to say, "Sorry, we are working on it. We will achieve results." But in this, the same thing, there is the powerful man today in Baghdad is the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister al-Maliki, who is Falah Fayyad. Falah Fayyad is the decision maker on this file. And he is the one who doesn't want to discuss. He just orders, "I want results and I want dates. Tell me when." We have given the deadline of December, it's passed. We will not tolerate any more delays. Now, we hear every day about these difficulties, about water, about access to medicine, access to lawyers, access. I directly put the question to my counterparts. I mean, you hear very much about Colonel Haqi, Colonel Sadaq. I work with them on a daily basis. And I tell them, "Why are you doing this?" First of all, I must say that they are not the decision makers. They are executive officers. The decision makers on this particular file are Falah Fayyad and the Prime Minister al-Maliki. So now, when I ask the executive officers, my counterparts on this file, they tell me, we deal with them the way we deal. And I reminded them that the Spanish court, the Spanish Central Criminal Court, has SADC on its list for it has a writ against him. And when I said to him, SADC, why do you want to be notorious in your conduct, criminal conduct? He said to me, I will not travel, they will never get me. He's not denying, he never denied that what he's doing is criminal. He just told me with the sort of mentality of a villager, telling me I don't travel, they will never get me. This is the kind of people who deal on daily basis. And actually SADC is the running manager of Ashraf, of Camp Liberty. So the policy is there. It's been put long ago. It's clear. It's in violation of the most fundamental values of the United Nations. It's been ordered by the office of the Prime Minister, executed by these two officers who you know about them. And we were there to simply try to satisfy this one and the other, and try also to keep in mind that we are the guests of Iraq and we have to behave as guests of Iraq, and when the Prime Minister gets upset, we will all pack up and go.
We've been there and done that.
Yes. There was a movie years ago when I was in college called Z. You remember that movie?
Yes.
What you described. Did you ever see that, Your Honor?
I did not.
You might... I think what you're describing surreal nature of the relationships there of the United Nations, supposedly there to protect human rights.
I did.
And the reality of
it
fits right into what Z was all about. We've been joined by our ranking member, Carnahan. Mr. Carnahan, unfortunately, like so many of us, is running between various events right now. Do you have anything that you'd like to ask or...
Just want to thank you for being here. I understand we've got another part of the hearing coming up, so I'm going to reserve my questions so we can move on, and again apologize for having to go back and forth between two different hearings, but I'm glad to get to be here for part of it. Thank you.
Okay, and Congresswoman Chu, would you have a question or two?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Bowmdra, first I'd like to ask about conditions at Camp Liberty. You are one of the few outsiders that have been able to visit Camp Liberty, and you were there before the residents of Camp Ashraf were transferred there, and described the terrible conditions of the mobile units and the prison-like security. Today, the residents are still concerned about the lack of access to water and electricity, but U.S. officials are saying that it is Spartan but livable. When you visited initially, were you able to determine whether there were humanitarian basics such as water and electricity and shade? And have you been there since? Have the conditions changed at all? And do the current conditions meet UN humanitarian standards?
Thank you. Thank you very much. This is the question that I was actually waiting to answer. Because it's since December we started actually, when we started preparing the file, we went to take pictures, and we had to select pictures that are sellable to the Ashrafis and to the international community. We had to make specific selection. We took specific corners and scenery. And these pictures, a large number of these pictures, we had to sit down in the whole Yunami decision makers, the whole heads of sections. We sat down around the table and we have to go through them one by one. Is that appealing? Is it sellable picture? We keep it aside. Those who are not sellable, put aside. And even when we were there, it was a delegation of about 8 people. Everybody was instructed to take pictures so that when we go back to base, we compare. And that's what we did. and we only selected a number of pictures. Simply, in December 2011, the camp was totally vandalized. It was handed over from the USFI to the Iraqis on the 3rd of December. The 8th of December I was there, and I noticed that the whole place was totally vandalized, and it was looted. I hear now in some reports in the Washington Post that the dining facility has even flat TVs on the wall. I could show you a picture where that flat TV was empty when I visited the camp because it was stolen. And now that Ashrafis have brought some improvement to the camp, they are putting it to the account of the government of Iraq. The government of Iraq does not spend a penny for the residents of Camp Liberty. It's their own work, their own hardship. There is certainly some improvement from December till today. But this is not thanks to the hospitality of the government of Iraq. It's their own achievement at a very high cost because they pay for everything above the market price. They are isolated and they have no access to the outside, so basically the Iraqis are imposing on them certain merchants. And there is a long story I don't want to open up here because it will waste your time, but I'm telling you, even these merchants are specially selected by the Prime Minister's office, and then you hear about the issue about property, these merchants who suddenly turned up and became the decision maker on the future of the property of the Ashrafis in Camp Liberty. That's the situation. Whatever improvement, if there is any, it's not thanks to the government of Iraq or thanks to the United Nations. It's thanks to the hardship and the entrepreneur spirit of these people.
In fact, I have an invoice here that I was shown, which is from the residents in Camp Ashraf that details the purchase of a $500,000 water purification infrastructure, and this will help residents have clean access to water, but apparently the Iraqi government is refusing to let them bring it into Camp Liberty to purify the water from a nearby canal. And shouldn't they be able to bring in their own property to improve the camp and the water quality? Wouldn't this be the standard in other refugee camps around the world?
The official policy of the government of Iraq is to make their life unbearable. If we always keep in mind that this is the official policy and this is the executive officers on the ground always act in this direction. So even we hear about promises made here and there, but there will be always obstacles, there will be always delays, there will be always problems, because the policy is to make their life unbearable, to break their will, to push them to abandon living in the group and disappear one by one in any direction.
And if I could ask one final question about property at Camp Ashraf, because these last groups of Ashraf residents are leaving millions of dollars of property behind. And I understand that I saw this list of 1,200 cars, 328 generators, 2 water prompting and purification stations, dozens of industrial workshops, and so forth. But so far, the Iraqi government hasn't given access for merchants, given the merchants access to Ashraf who could purchase these properties, and that they're making it difficult for the residents to get the best price for their goods. So what should the U.S. and the UN do to ensure that the property of Ashraf residents can be sold if they can't bring them to Camp Liberty?
First, the Iraqis have been consistent with their official policy. They will not tolerate the communal property. Communal property is everything in Ashraf that is not individually owned. And they claim that the communal property is property of the people of Iraq. So Ashrafis cannot have it. Now, with the intervention of the UN and all the discussion and all the publicity going on, they will not say we will deprive them of this property, but they will manipulate the situation to, at the end result, deprive them of such property. And the fact that, I don't know whether you are aware of the details about this merchant who've been imposed on this merchant, is really the way they would like to sort of put the blame on the Ashrafis. They failed in dealing with the merchant, while this merchant, even the procedure itself is against the fundamental rules of transactions of the United Nations. You are supposed to publicize, you are supposed to receive a number of bids in sealed envelopes, you are supposed to select 3 bidders, the best 3 bidders, and out of the 3 bidders you grant the markets or the transaction to one of them. This did not take place, and this is in violation of the rules of the United Nations. So this is the policy set by the government of Iraq, supported by UNAMI.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. For the record, this witness has testified that the purpose of the activity and the rules and the policies that were being laid down when he worked there for the United Nations, the policies and the rules that were being laid down by the Iraqi government and by his United Nations superiors, was that they were trying to make a life for the people at Camp Ashraf unbearable. Correct? So these people were intentionally creating the suffering of certain of these people. That was an intentional outcome.
That's my understanding, Mr. Chairman.
And your understanding and your vision of that was obtained through your personal actions or personal situation, which puts you right in the middle.
As a lead person on Ashraf file, yes, this is my understanding.
So we have government officials, and let us note at the same time, there is no way out for these people, because we have designated, our government has designated these folks as terrorists. They have a terrorist designation. So our government has designated, has prevented them from leaving, and the other government entities, United Nations and Iraqis, are intentionally creating suffering. Did you at any time ask representatives of the United States government for help, to help you in this situation?
I was interacting with the officials of the Prime Minister's office on a daily basis.
Prime Minister's office? What about the United States government?
The United States government on official level, it's not within my job to sort of interact with them. It's the special representative of Secretary General who briefs his counterparts at the...
Okay, to your knowledge, was the United States asked for help in preventing this suffering?
The U.S. Embassy always declared that we are behind UNAMI. We support whatever UNAMI does.
But you're now testifying that the policy was to create suffering. Right.
I do confirm that.
So the United States, did the people who laid down this support on the part of the United States for this policy, were they also aware that the actual policy was not to try to treat these people decently, but instead to create suffering among them?
The only, at my level, the only people that I dealt with closely are my counterparts at the U.S. Embassy and my counterparts at the USFI in Camp Ashraf, and I commend their behavior, their conduct, I have nothing to complain about.
Right, I'm not talking about their behavior.
It's above my capacity to talk about who would relay this information.
Okay, but you did just testify that the United States government was to back up the United Nations activities all the way, and you're also testifying that the United Nations, as well as the Maliki government, their actual goal was to create suffering among these people. Speculate, and somebody who has never been there speculate. So your observations that the suffering of these people was intentional and created by decisions that were made by the Maliki government and by the United Nations to go along with it, and at the very least, our government knew about this and did nothing to stop it. Correct?
I have no doubt about that.
All right. Thank you very much for your testimony today. We will now move into the official hearing. We now move into the formal hearing on United States and Iraqi failures in regard to Camp Ashraf and, by extension, the strategic situation in Iraq and the region.